Now, what we have seen, and again, Bob mentioned it, is we're beginning to see disability, and in my view, quite well overdue, but disability has become part of the human rights agenda. And this is, I mean, this is fantastic. It clearly is a landmark in the area of human rights. But it's going to require that we change our mindsets. We cannot continue to do business as usual. It's also going to require that we become part of the mainstream human rights agenda. So we need to make sure that we're working with human rights, mainstream human rights organizations. But we also need to be realistic and pragmatic about what we can and cannot do. And I think that requires us then to look at how we can establish new alliances. And related to that, we need to find new mechanisms to use, both nationally and internationally. I think it's safe to say that much of this awareness, this global awareness that we're experiencing, has been spurred on by the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that came into force in May 2008. Now, what the Convention does is really to promote cross-sectoral work, and it seeks to achieve the full integration of persons with disability in all aspects of life. It makes specific reference to the importance of development in addressing the rights of people with disabilities. And this is not common in international human rights instruments. But it was very clear from the negotiations in New York in the development of this convention that we could not just have a convention that spoke about discrimination. It could not just be a convention that was an anti-discrimination convention, but it needed to be one that was underpinned by substantial rights, like the right to education, like the right to health care, etc. The Convention has and will continue to impact international development aid, including the work of the World Bank. And to date, we've seen a rapid ratification of this convention from various countries. And many of these countries are the clients of the World Bank that receive assistance. And this is important because I think that this is going to begin to define the way we provide assistance and the kind of technical assistance we put in place. I think it's also very important to recognize that the Convention recognizes the importance of collecting data. Because, as I said earlier on, we know that the population of people with disabilities is about 10 to 12%, but we're not sure, we're not absolutely sure. So we need to begin to have more census data. We need to have more information about people with disabilities, disaggregated data on women with disabilities included. So the Convention really provides a comprehensive and pragmatic framework for achieving inclusive development, which is certainly welcomed. And with this, it stands to trigger the social inclusion of people with disabilities into mainstream society. And I believe that the Convention will also assist in making the issue of disability visible, certainly in the mainstream human rights arena. And already we're beginning to see this. Already we're beginning to see mainstream human rights lawyers interested in addressing issues related to disability rights. So I think that the spin-offs from the Convention are very, very important. I think there's an issue that's often not thought of in relation to the Convention, and it's the fact that the Convention heralds a new era in life, not only for people with disabilities. I mean, clearly, the beneficiaries are people with disabilities, but it's for everybody else in society. And there has been an emphasis on how it will affect people with disabilities, but in fact, everybody will have to change their ways of thinking and behaving in order to make this revolution on paper also become a revolution in practice. And I mean, I think very often people say to me, well, that's great, but how do we do this? And I don't want to sound naive, and I recognize that the implementation of the convention requires resources, it requires time, it requires action, it requires warm bodies to actually ensure that this happens. But I also know that it can be done. And already we're beginning to witness the power of the convention. We're already seeing how the convention, and perhaps more so, the process of developing this convention, has served to galvanize disabled people's organizations throughout the world. It's provided a common goal, it's provided a platform, and it's provided a framework. I also think that we need to think of inclusive development as a multi-stakeholder responsibility. And therefore, in that regard, to recognize that we all have a role to play. Finally, I would like to leave with you some low-hanging fruit that I see in arm's reach. They will be important in ensuring that people with disabilities are included in development. The first one, which I think is pretty basic, is to include people with disabilities in all aspects of development projects. So we're not saying have standalone disability projects, but include people with disabilities in all aspects of development projects. The second one is to think outside of the box. Be creative, be innovative. And the third one is to begin to develop partnerships, to share knowledge, and to work with organizations of people with disabilities. Thank you for your attention.